Great. Good to see where people are joining us from. We have a good amount that are coming from the private high school side. Glad to have our public high schools represented as well as our CBOs. Awesome. And a private university. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. All right. Oh, go ahead.
As we prepare to turn over the spotlight to our presenters, we want to encourage our attendees to use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout the presentations.
Wonderful. So let's get started with our first presentation. Our first presentation is Navigating Foundational Conversations about Race-Conscious Admissions in a K-12 Setting. Our presenters this morning are going to be Ashley Armato, Shannon Barrilleaux, and Adrienne Armato-Adi. I'm going to read just the bios of all of these fantastic ladies that are going to be presenting for us this morning. Ashley Armato joined the Access Board in 2021 and was named the first chair of the Organizational Accountability for Access and Equity Committee in 2022. She was formerly the Senior Associate Director of College Counseling and co-coordinator of Equity and Inclusion at Palmer Trinity School in Miami, Florida. She has also worked with the CBO Thrive Scholars as their Summer Academy Director since 2018. Prior to joining the College Counseling Department at Palmer Trinity in 2010, she worked in college admission at Amherst College. Ashley served on the Access, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee from 2018 to 2021. From 2017 to 2019, she served as co-chair of the Latinx Special Interest Group for SACAC and joined the SACAC board from 2019 to 2022. Shannon Barrilleaux is the Director of College Counseling at Metairie Park Country Day School in Metairie, Louisiana, joining the K-12 co-ed independent school community in 2014. With a master's degree in psychological counseling and licensed as a professional counselor, Shannon worked with children and adolescents in their communities and schools through Medicaid behavioral health services early in her career before transitioning to school counseling. Always aware of the stages of adolescence development throughout college research and admission process, programming is student-centered, aiming to meet students where they are with unconditional support. In addition to college counseling at Metairie Park, Shannon serves on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee, leads the GSA, and works in partnership with the Alumni Director on the transition to college and young alumni success programming. Shannon serves on the NACAC Admissions Practices Committee and Board of Directors of the Southern Association of College Admission Counseling, and is on the advisory boards for Drexel University and Oglethorpe University. Widely regarded as an ethical leader with a deep passion and expertise in college access and enrollment, Adrienne Armato-Adi moved to Charlotte last year to serve in the role of Vice President for Strategic Enrollment and Communications at Queen's University of Charlotte. She is known for creating practices that actively include different voices and views while building communities on college campuses. Prior to joining the Queens and Charlotte community, Adrienne held enrollment leadership positions at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, Berry College in Rome, Georgia, University of Rochester in Rochester, New York, and Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. I'd now like to turn it over to our first presenters. Oh, sorry, there is more to say about Ms. Adrienne. Her previous experience also includes co-chairing an Inclusive Practices Committee for the New England Association for College Admission Counseling and serving as a presenter and keynote speaker for several regional and national associations, including the Southern Association for College Admission Counseling, the College Board Forum, and the National Association for College Admission Counseling, among others. Adrienne earned her bachelor's degree in mathematics from Kenyon College, her master's degree in educational measurement and statistics from the Ohio State University. I would now like to turn it over to our first presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to speak on this topic with y'all. I'm Ashley Armato, as Danielle mentioned, and I'm joined by Adrienne and Shannon. And let's see, we just did our bios. We can go to the next one. And then just as an intro as to why we wanted to have this conversation, the Supreme Court case is hearing on race-conscious admissions, and we don't know when they're going to release their decision. A lot of folks are speculating in June, but up until then, there's been a lot of conversation about what could happen, what might happen. And initially, Shannon and I chatted a little bit about how we could be proactive on our end. A lot of conversations are happening on the college side, and we're so excited to have Adrienne here with us to talk a little bit about how they're piecing through that and what they're thinking on with regards to what might happen. But we wanted to talk about what we could do in our offices with our communities. Practically, we think it's important to have data and language to be able to navigate these decisions. And then personally, this is something that we all strongly believe in, and we understand that diversity matters, that diversity and equity in the classroom and on college campuses and in any spaces where learning is happening is really important. And if the decision does get struck, if they do strike down race-conscious admissions, what do we do to make sure that these elements are still surviving and how the conversation can go forward from there? Awesome. So on our next slide, we chatted a little bit about just a clarity of language. And this is taken from David Hawkins, who did a presentation in October. So affirmative action and race-conscious admissions, those terms are typically used interchangeably, but they actually mean different things. Affirmative action involves decisions that assess eligibility, conditioned on race, status, and identity, policies that establish quotas or point systems for applicants from specific groups, and that was struck down as not legal within the university setting. Particularly, race-conscious admissions involves race as a standalone factor in consideration with other factors typically considered in the admission process, which is what currently a lot of universities are doing. And just a reminder of holistic review, that is really taking into consideration lots of things about students, and it does not involve racial categorization or stereotyping as SFFA maintains, and we'll get into them a little bit, but it's more reflective of a process in which all relevant factors considered in a combination shape applicant-specific judgments about their ability to succeed, contribute to, and benefit from their learning environment, peers, and community. So we just wanted to put that out there before we start diving into some of the legalese about these cases.
Okay, well, we were going to put a lot of words on the page for you to take in after when we return the slides, but we'll kind of try to sum up what you're reading here. The first case came from Alan Bakke, who sued the regents of the University of California. He was denied admission to UC Davis's medical school twice, and he sued claiming reverse discrimination. In that case, it was a split decision. There were 4-4 justices for the plaintiff, but Justice Powell was the split decision. And because of this split, Alan Bakke gained admission to UC Davis Medical School, and affirmative action was upheld. The Supreme Court ruled that a university's use of racial quotas in its admission process was unconstitutional, but a school's use of affirmative action to accept more minority applicants was constitutional in the same circumstances. That was in 1978. The next case we see is in 1996 with Hopgood versus Texas. In this case, there were 4 plaintiffs. They all applied to the University of Texas School of Law, and they had LSAT scores, which were higher than 83% of the Latinx students and 88% of the Black students. And the total enrollment is about 419 students at the time. So we're talking a very few amount of students. The appeals court held in this case that the University of Texas Law School could not use race as a factor in determining which applicants to admit to the university. And there were some previous cases that had ruled about this being unconstitutional when they are awarding merit scholarships. But because of this case, we see in 1997, on the next slide, that the Texas House bill enacts the 10% rule, which we've seen in Texas. The top 10% of classes that graduate from high school were automatically admitted to Texas public universities. Because of how many students apply to the University of Texas, we've seen that plan steadily go down. And it's currently, since 2017, at 6% for the University of Texas at Austin. And it's interesting to see how other states reacted, and as we prepare for the decision, what might be enacted in other states. This is a model that many people are talking about might overflow into a variety of states after the decision in June.
Sure. So next we have some of the University of Michigan cases. One was for the use of race in undergraduate admissions, and the other one was for their law school. So for Michigan used a 150-point scale to rank applicants, with 100 points needed to guarantee admissions, and the university gave bonus points to applicants from one of 3 select racial minority groups: African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, that were considered to be underrepresented on the campus. Eventually, both cases were ruled a little differently. The court upheld the use of race as an admission factor for the law school, but struck down the admissions policy that awarded points to minority applicants. So it was a little bit different in what they could end up doing. So that set the stage for Students for Fair Admissions to come into things. They're a nonprofit led by anti-civil rights activist Edward Bloom, filed lawsuits against Harvard and UNC in 2014. And this is really, this is just something that they are hell-bent on finding a way to strike down. It's a coordinated campaign, started with the landmark case Fisher v. University of Texas, where the court did uphold the University of Texas race-conscious admissions practices. Again, this is with a different Supreme Court, so I think part of the concern is this could go differently later with a more conservative court. Bloom is also the architect between the Shelby County v. Holder case, where the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. So this is a person who has a particular agenda, and they've gone to court many times trying to plead cases that are going to chip away at lots of rights and the ability, particularly of people of color and underrepresented minorities in the admissions process. It is 20,000 individuals strong, and they have convinced a lot of folks that racial classifications and preferences in college admissions are unfair, unnecessary, and unconstitutional. So the very well-known Abigail Fisher v. University of Texas at Austin. So they upheld in this case the notion that diversity in higher education was compelling state interest. Abigail Fisher was arguing against her admissions to the school, that she wasn't considered because she wasn't neither in the top 10 or because she was not considered a minority, and felt that because there was an advantage given to minority students, she did not benefit. But what they did decide was that it restated previous decisions that found that the university's admission process, which considers race as a factor, must withstand strict judicial scrutiny. Moreover, remanding the case to lower court, the court held that the university must show that classification is necessary to the accomplishment of its purpose. So at this point, they're putting more onus on colleges to state why they need to use race in the admissions process. And then SFFA started to build their case against Harvard College. In 2014, SFFA and other plaintiffs filed a lawsuit against Harvard, claiming that Harvard's race-conscious admission policy unlawfully discriminates against Asian American applicants in violation of the Civil Rights Act. In 2019, Judge Allison Burroughs rejected the plaintiff's claims, ruling that Harvard does not discriminate against Asian Americans or engage in racial balancing, and that the admission practice use of race is consistent with Supreme Court precedent. They filed an appeal. In 2020, the Court of Appeals upheld the lower court's decision affirming Harvard's race-conscious admission program does not violate Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Essentially, at this point, they pivoted. SFFA was working with Abigail Fisher. She's then gone on to graduate from another school, now works for Edward Bloom. So this is also something that she's now continuing to contribute to. They pivoted from using white students to argue this case to now arguing with Asian American and Asian students. I think it's important to state that the majority, when polled, the majority of Asian Americans do believe in race-conscious admissions. And there is a narrative that SFFA is trying to produce and create that Asians are against race-conscious admissions as a group. So just wanted to put those statistics out there as well, that this isn't something, they're trying to create division within underrepresented minorities and minority groups. And that division, statistically and, in a lot of our experiences does not exist. Afterwards, they kept going in 2021, filed a petition in hopes of getting the case reviewed by the Supreme Court. It introduces a new argument to overturn Grutter for the Michigan case, in which the Supreme Court did uphold the right of college admissions boards to use race as a factor to promote student diversity. In 2021, Harvard filed an opposing brief to have the petition rejected, noting 4 decades of established legal precedent. And then in 2022, the Supreme Court agreed to hear SFFA, and that's kind of where we are right now. They consolidated that case with the University of North Carolina, which is a public university. UNC is covered by the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection. And in this case, the plaintiffs argue that the university's consideration of race in its undergraduate admissions process violates both Title VI and the Constitution. So that's where we're right now. And this slide just kind of presents the arguments from both sides. So SFFA is saying that we were wrong in Grutter, it's a lie. This is unworkable in practice. You can't measure whether or not your objectives using race is actually doing anything on your campuses. And they're quoting, Judge Alito, who says that, affirmative action has gone wild. All of this is very inflammatory. And then the briefs of those who are, working to keep race-conscious admissions are saying that, the benefits of racial diversity are substantial and has been demonstrated. There's a harm when it's taken away. Achieving diversity's benefits are a medical, economic, and military imperative. Holistic review is not just looking at race on its own. They're not assumptions or labels or stereotypes. It's within the narrative of a student's identity. Race-neutral strategies have not been working in states where they've banned it. They're seeing a steep decline in diversity among their applicants and the students that are on their campus as enrolled students. And essentially, the view that the Constitution is colorblind reflects a misreading of the Constitution and our history.
There's a lot of research because of the states that have banned. There are 19 total states, and they're researching the flagship universities in particular and the public schools and seeing consistent declines. I thought it was really powerful that the UC president and the 10 chancellors wrote an amicus brief to talk about decades of outreach programs to low-income students and recrafted admissions policies have fallen short. The elimination of affirmative action has led to persistent declines in underrepresented students on campus that are admitted and enrolling in the universities in these states. And alternative policies and administrative decisions were unable to fully replace race-based affirmative action. I'm attaching a study, and the link will be in there, but it's very detailed and shows a persistent decline year after year.
And so we have just thrown a lot of information at you, the TLDR version of the history that we've all, that influences our work today. And so I think that volume of information can make it seem like we're talking about a lot of colleges and universities. And we're certainly talking a lot about systems in which we are all operating. But the universities that are highlighted in these cases are not representative of the majority of universities serving the majority of students in our country and around the world. And so I just think it's important to call out where some of these universities are in greater alignment with the majority and where they're not. And so we live in a capitalist society, right? And these universities are among just 2% of the universities in the country when we look at the size of their endowments. All of these universities have significant endowments as individuals, and those part of public university systems have very large endowments within the university themselves and within the overall public university system. how those endowments are allocated by universities within each system gets a little bit interesting as well. It's also important to note that all of these universities are accepting less than half of the students who apply, where the majority of universities in the country are accepting the majority of students to apply to them. And so the system and the process is designed to influence our thinking and to make us feel like space in education, particularly in higher education, is limited when the reality is space is not limited. And so I'm encouraging folks who are tuning in today to really think about and cultivate a mindset of abundance too, as we navigate the many uncertainties that are before us, certainly in the coming months as we get more and different information. But as we proceed forward as change makers, we're going to have to be comfortable with some of the ambiguity. And if we approach it with there are opportunities out there, it can help us through some of these darker periods that we have to live in. 3 of these universities are really serving their states as designed. One of them, Harvard, is not a public flagship university, a very different type of mission and vision, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. And then some of these universities are incredibly diverse racially and ethnically. And so that doesn't mean we should stop. There isn't an end to this or a perfect number in any way, shape, or form, but there is some progress that has been made by some of these policies that have been enacted. And so the worry that people may be feeling is warranted because we've taken steps forward, and potential rulings could shift some of that progress if we are not prepared. We move forward. And so as we're preparing at colleges and universities, Ashley thoughtfully discussed holistic review and its warrants. And I think that this is where the personal and professional really come into play, and where it's incredibly important to get clear on language and on what's working to build the diverse communities that we want, and where we need to continue to improve as colleges and universities on our holistic review practices. And so Danielle read my bio. Thank you for that, Danielle. For folks who don't know me, I studied math and statistics. You learned that earlier today, and I'm a big proponent of what we measure matters, and how we measure it also really matters. And so one of the beauties of American education and American higher education is there isn't one universal system. It allows us to see students as individual people, to see them as who they are. One of the major challenges is that there is no one universal system. And this begins with how we educate people before they're showing up in kindergarten. So any access that students have influences how we're reviewing them in the college and university side. And so as we think about our work going forward, oftentimes colleges and universities are expected to completely dismantle systems that got started before students were even born. And so we've got to be looking at the whole system holistically. Each university, it just came from Baton Rouge. I know I'm doing the Louisiana drive-in workshop. I was in Baton Rouge just yesterday, and I'm happy to be back in Charlotte today. But we were talking with students, doing case studies exercise over the weekend around institutional priorities. So as I'm looking at the mission of the University of California system, I'm learning that the university is to serve society as a center of higher learning, providing long-term societal benefits through transmitting advanced knowledge, discovering new knowledge, and functioning as an active working repository of organized knowledge. When I think about the University of Texas at Austin and their mission, the University of Texas at Austin mission is to achieve excellence in the interrelated areas of undergraduate education, graduate education, research, and public service. The university provides superior and comprehensive educational opportunities at the baccalaureate level through doctoral and special professional educational levels. Michigan's mission is to serve the people of Michigan, which is interesting. It's the public flagship here, whose half of their undergraduate population is from Michigan. The rest is from all over the world. It's the least representative of their state compared to North Carolina, UT Austin, and the UCs we have here. But the first university, as I'm looking at missions, to really name service to the people of the state. Something to be mindful of as we're thinking about holistic review practices. So Michigan serving the state and the world through preeminence in creating, communicating, preserving, and applying knowledge, art, and academic values, and in developing leaders and citizens who will challenge the present and enrich the future. Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill serves North Carolina. They're doing that. Quite a few of the University of North Carolina students come from the great state of North Carolina and the world through teaching, research, and public service. We embrace an unwavering commitment to excellence as one of the world's great research universities. And our mission is to serve as a center for research, scholarship, and creativity, and to teach a diverse community of undergraduate, graduate, and professional students to become the next generation of leaders. Thanks for bearing with me. I've got one more mission for you, and it's Harvard's. As America's oldest and most venerable institution of higher learning, Harvard's mission is to advance new ideas and promote enduring knowledge. And so you've just heard 5 different university missions. Only 2 of them speak to directly serving their states in Michigan and in UNC Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill is the only mission that explicitly names educating a diverse community. And so as we're thinking about holistic review as admission officers, it's my job to steward the university's mission and to curate the community in a way that's bringing that mission to life. And so when I look at things like rigor, and I'm thinking about the system that our students have grown up in, I know from research, from reading things like Paul Tufts' book, that fewer than half of the high schools in the United States offer calculus. I've had the great privilege of working at universities that are incredibly well-resourced, that have applicant pools that are dominated by students who have access to calculus. I studied math. I love calculus. And I know, and when I think about some of my experiences in admissions, that calculus and access to calculus is a tremendous barrier to universities that have incredible selectivity, that have to say no more than they say yes. When I think about rigor, I also think about advanced placement classes and access to those. It costs money to teach those classes. It costs money to take those examinations. I think about international baccalaureate and Cambridge programs. I think about dual enrollment and how so many students at public schools, the only access they have to higher level classes is through dual enrollment. And I've been in some university settings where dual enrollment courses have been seen as less than, because somehow they're not as standardized as those advanced placement classes. And these are the same universities that are pushing back on standardized tests with the SAT and the ACT. And so even within a holistic system, we as university leaders need to absolutely be doing training on where bias is showing up within our holistic review. I think about how the racial ethnic identity of a teacher may influence how they're grading a student, and the racial and ethnic identity of a student may influence how they're being graded. Think about extracurricular activities and how excited an admissions committee can get when we review an application of a student body president, and how the level of excitement changes when we see somebody has earned an assistant manager position at the grocery store. Think about essays and how they're written and coached in environments where students have access to great counselors like Shannon and Ashley, who can walk them through that essay process. And I can't help but remember sitting in a visit program, watching a student on their phone as I'm talking about the admissions process and getting upset. One student, it's a huge auditorium. What is this student doing on their phone right now? And after talking, giving the session, I went up and I chatted with the student because I was so curious. Why are you here and on your phone? And before I could say anything, they approached me with excitement. I'm so happy to be here. I love this session. I started filling out my application and writing my essay right now on my phone because I have access to the internet here and I don't at home. I think about recommendations and how some teachers have time in their schedules to do that because they're working with, a couple of dozen students. I went to a high school that served 3,000 students. 40% of us graduated from high school. My teacher's biggest concern, the most important thing they could be working on was helping students show up at class the next day. There wasn't time to write a thoughtful and extensive recommendation. And so admission officers, we have to think about all of these things as we're reviewing thousands of applications holistically and understand what we should expect from student to student, environment to environment. We spend a lot of time on this at a lot of different universities on how we proceed forward, assuming the worst possible outcome from the Supreme Court, assuming we can't factor any of these identity pieces for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. I think it's important to call that out because I imagine white students can still speak to their experiences because we can't help but be entangled in the American system that centers whiteness in this process. So when we're talking about students losing the ability to speak to identity, we're talking specifically about Black, Brown, and Indigenous students and people. But there is no one size fits all answer to this. Shannon mentioned more states and systems thinking about the Texas model. That could work in an environment where there are a lot of students and a lot of applications and a lot of decisions that need to be made in a limited amount of time. In my context, we're thinking about how we champion some of those activities that anybody can do, but might disproportionately be done by students who are Black, Brown, and Indigenous, and how we're scoring those factors so that the scale itself isn't about any one particular student alone, but we're using the scale instead to champion the many different activities in the many different ways that they show up so that students get in because they get in and not because, oh, well, we've lessened this particular standard because of the student's particular identity. That's not a helpful way to teach admission officers and college community members to see students. And it perpetuates a narrative that some people can have lesser qualifications and have access to an opportunity when others have to overperform. And we know that that's not the case. Being in a college and university setting, we know that students can show us different ways of preparedness. I think it's amazing when a student has to have significant family responsibilities, helps younger siblings get breakfast, gets them to school, and manages to take a dual enrollment class at the local community college while also participating in a full-time job to help support their family. That student's experience is just as full and just as valid and important as a student who gets driven to school and is able to participate in 2 sports, play the flute, and serve as head of the prom committee. Their lives should be seen as having to manage a significant amount of responsibilities and competing priorities. Doesn't matter what they are. That's what we're looking for in a college community. And so we move forward to the next slide. No, I know we've got a lot of high schools here, community-based organizations here. There's a lot of uncertainty, particularly around this decision, but also with growing students and helping them become people. And know that, like Ashley started us off with, this is a personal and professional world. There are people on the other side of those applications who are really driven to see students for who they are and are committed to figuring out new and different ways to see folks. We have a history of barriers being put in our place. We have a history of tearing them down. And so we are in this together. It's going to be messy before it gets clean, but I am confident that through partnership, through really valuing the people, we can maintain some of the progress and develop an even better system going forward, regardless of what happens in Washington.
Okay, I'm not sure why there's no text on the slide, but I will start talking about the reason we decided to do this session is that Ashley and I were attending a lot of webinars on the topic of race-conscious admissions, and we were hearing mostly from higher ed professionals. The panelists were on the college side. It is being talked about a lot, but we hadn't heard from the K through 12 high school constituent. And so we decided to start talking about it amongst ourselves. And I can be honest that I really started to dig into this with, putting the presentation together. And it has got me thinking of how I'm going to implement this in our own community. But one of the biggest things that has already come up in a senior parent night was how will this decision or these decisions affect other admission categories, including legacy admits, athletic admission, development cases. 15.5% of the incoming class of 2025 of Harvard were legacy admits. And so if we are talking about advantages, will we have to tear down some of the other advantages that are seen in higher education? We may see more attention paid to an applicant's socioeconomic status. We talked about the percent programs. I think it's important to remember that when you see President Michael Drake said that they've done decades of outreach to low-income communities and students and recrafted their admission policies, and that has all fallen short. Also that, all Black, Brown, Indigenous students aren't low income. There has to be ways to see them in other communities. The national recognition programs, I'm thinking of the African American recognition programs. I have several students who have qualified for full tuition. Like, are they going to be able to exist? Does that automatically identify them in this process? And it is largely going to depend on how broad the rulings are, but definitely things that we should be considering. So I think prepare to have some hard conversations within your own communities. I know we are preparing this, kind of understanding the language around it, helping people understand the history and the language and why diversity is important. The conversations are going to be different with families of color and white families, and be prepared to kind of have hard conversations with both. And really encourage students to be their authentic selves. I think that Adrienne really spoke well about every student as an individual. And I think that in many of our communities, we see students who want to have an angle, or they want to write an essay that is, what's going to look good for our college, and they have trouble tapping into what's important to them and sharing their lived experience. So just really encouraging students to be authentic and show colleges, who they are. Preparing communications before the summer. I know I plan to have a conversation with my principal and my head of school, and hopefully they're thinking about this, because we will be on summer break. Most of us will be on summer break. But how we acknowledge that within our communities. Are we going to acknowledge it within our communities? And just, kind of helping our administrators have the language to talk about this topic of race conscious admission with our communities. And then finally, just ask questions of your administrators and your schools, and support students who want to mobilize. Most importantly, support your students in being authentic. So I think that wraps up. We will be presenting at SACAC'S the same topic. If you're joining us at the conference in April, we'd love to see you and say hello in person.
Thank you, ladies. If you want to open it up to take questions at this time, you're welcome to do that. I want to update your presentation so that I can show that recommendation slide that you just went over.
I made that slide, so I'm feeling a certain type of guilt for some reason it didn't populate. Of course, it's the one that I just worked on. But in general, and for SACAC, we definitely, this is our soft launch presentation, but for SACAC, we want to come up with, a template for a letter to send out to families, some bullet points for conversations. We want to, give out resources as much as we can. And in hearing Adrienne speak, and so eloquently and so just beautifully on, how this process works, and humanizing all the admissions folks on the other end of this, there certainly might be conversations that come in the future about, okay, so it happened and now what? And just making sure that we're all in communication with one another about how we can help our students the most, and to provide that information so it can be shared widely, and so lots of folks can have access to it. But yeah, questions would be great if y'all have them.
So I know you all are talking about, sorry, this is for me, while we're waiting on more questions. I know you all are talking about maybe putting together some type of document or just shared resource for counselors to be able to easily access. Have you come across a school or counselors who have went ahead and addressed this within their schools, and just what was the reaction, from the community?
I know some program or some college counseling departments teach classes, and I know that that's come up some of the classes. For me, it's come up mostly in individual conversations with families about just changes, and there are a lot of changes coming in the future. The digital SAT, the FAFSA being released later. So I've just made sure to include it in just my updates for all families, so that if they want to engage more, that they can. And if they have any questions, they can talk about that. I think some schools are waiting until after the decision comes, because I don't think they want to preemptively open up a can of worms. But if anyone does know of schools or programs where they have already directly discussed this as a community, I'd be really interested to hear about it. I know that I'm really interested to talk about with our DI coordinator at our school and with our admissions office, to see just if they're hearing anything in their communities. And just, again, I think we need to double down in terms of what we value at our schools, and we need to have, shared language and really reach back to our missions for that work.
I think a simple way to start the conversation, or at least where my brain is going, is I'd like to get in front of our faculty, because I think that everyone in the community should understand the history and kind of the language, and just be able to have the conversations. If a teacher isn't thinking about this and someone brings it up in a conference or So I think for me personally, I'm going to start with trying to get some time in front of my faculty at a meeting to just present kind of like this in a shortened version, to help people just understand if they have not been following it. I mean, we live in this world, but not everybody lives in this college admissions mindset. So just hoping to educate our community and then continue, like Ashley said, to promote, the benefits of diversity within our own community. And why that's so important to learn and grow in a diverse community. There it is.
Thank you all for sharing that. And yes, on the screen are the recommendations and considerations that Shannon spoke about. And I wanted to be able to show this visually. I don't know what was happening there, but here you are.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to check here and see if we have any more questions that are in the Q&A. All right, it doesn't look like we do. Are there any final thoughts that you all want to share?
Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, we appreciate the opportunity to share with y'all and practice for our SACAC'S session where we'll do even more. And we wanted to also go over scenarios and give you all a chance to talk amongst yourselves and brainstorm on ways to talk about this, because it can be tough, but we want to practice, and the planning and all of that is what helps us be great at our jobs and help our students in our communities, which is what we're all really trying to do is help the kids.
Great, thank you.
All
Go ahead, Kayla.
no, go ahead.
Please go
All
ahead.
right. So our next presentation is Advising Students for Careers of the Future. It's an introduction to the field of public health by Dr. Rachael Reed. Dr. Reed is a versatile, results-driven public health professional and researcher with over 10 years of health promotion and research experience. She is currently the chair of the School of Population and Health Sciences and assistant professor of public health at Dillard University, a historically Black university in New Orleans, Louisiana. She is also the coordinator for the public health program. Dr. Reed has a broad background in public health with specific training and expertise in health equity, medical nutrition therapy, chronic disease prevention management, and the social determinants of health. Her research focuses on the impact of racism on health disparities, and prevention of non-communicable chronic diseases in underserved at-risk populations. She has worked on several funded projects, including the development and implementation of a community-partnered stroke prevention program in South Los Angeles, which garnered astronomical community buy-in and participation. Dr. Reed has a long history of service in her field. She currently serves as a member of the editorial board of the AJPM Focus. She is a dedicated speaker and has served as a keynote speaker, subject matter expert for several events and news interviews. She is also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Thank you so much, Kayla, and I hope it's good morning for everyone. So yes, as she mentioned, I am Dr. Reed, chair of the School of Population and Health Sciences at Dillard University. I am so happy to be here with you all today to share sort of my passion for public health and just give you some information to help you as you advise your students as they get ready to come into college. Now, I'm wondering if you all can actually do the chat to where we can see it, but I have a couple of interactive prompts. So first thing I want you to do is I want you to sort of think of who is it that you think of when you think of healthcare? Who or what is it in one word that you think of when you think of healthcare? And if you can just drop that into the chat and I will read some of those out. And I'm going to wait for some of those to pop up. So again, just in one word, who is it that you think of when you think of healthcare? Who or what?
Y'all can also put them in the question and answer as well, so it doesn't have to be a question to answer it.
Thank you. And I'm gonna wait a couple more seconds. I'm not seeing anything come up. Here we go. We have some really great ones. So we hear medical assistants, nurses, PCTs, doctors, psychiatrists. Those are all really, really great. And those are your usual people that you think of when you think of healthcare, specifically your doctors, your nurses. In a lot of cases, when especially high school students, that's who they're thinking of when they think, I want to work in healthcare. I want to help people, and this is what I want to do. And a lot of people really go to, you want to work in healthcare, you want to help people, then your option is doctor or nurse. But there are so many other options. There are over about 200 careers in healthcare, and it is constantly growing. So we always have a need for people in healthcare, and it's not always just a need for doctors and nurses. There's a need across the spectrum of healthcare careers. Next slide, please. Now, my next question, again, another interactive prompt, so feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A. So between the years of 1900 to 1999, in the United States, life expectancy actually increased by 30 years. I want to know how many of those years do you actually think were attributed to medical care? So do you think it's all 30 years of increased life expectancy is due to medical care? Do you think that's more like 20, 25 years? So again, when we think medical care, this is going to be going to your doctor's office, advances in medical equipment, any type of like innovative new medical procedures. How many of those increased years of life expectancy do you think were actually attributed to medical care? And I see a couple things in the Q&A. We have someone that said 20 years. We have 25 years. Anyone thinking anything different from 2025? All right, so we have about 25 years. So about 25 of those 30 years of increased life expectancy we are attributing to medical care. I'm going to ask you to hold on to that for just a second as I sort of get into exactly what is public health. So can I get the next slide? So public health, just in layman's terms of how we actually define it, is going to be the science and the art of preventing disease, prolonging life, and improving quality of life. So in simplest terms, public health is a focus very much so on disease prevention and health maintenance. So if you're thinking about people who may not have disease already, we're trying to keep them from developing disease. People who already have disease, we're trying to keep them healthy, prevent further complications. And usually we're doing that in a much more community-focused way. So we're doing that in a much more broader focus rather than sort of your individualized focus. So how does this actually differ from medical care? So again, medicine is focused on diagnosing and treating disease, whereas public health prevents disease. So when most people think of health, we tend to think of, again, your doctors, your nurses, hospital visits, when you get sick, when you're not sick, etc. But I always tell people health happens around us every single day. Just you sitting here on the Zoom call, there's something in that that has to do with health. Are you sitting in an area that's actually clean? Are you in a neighborhood that may be violent? How much education do you have? Your income level? When you're driving to your office every day, health is literally around us every day. If you stopped for coffee this morning, all of that is considered health. From the air we breathe, to where we sleep, to what we eat, to where we work, the relationships we have, health happens every day, all the time. So when we're thinking about health in sort of this finite, when I'm sick, when I'm in my doctor's office, we're only really capturing a very small piece of what actually determines our health. Whereas with public health, we're pretty much looking at pretty much everything else, everything outside of that. And the next slide may actually help to explain that a little bit better. So this slide shows you the factors that actually impact your health. So in public health, we talk a lot about your major determinants of health. And essentially, the way that we sort of define these is what's actually contributing to premature death. And when we say premature death, we're talking about death that occurs before the average age of death, which right now we consider that to be about 75 years old. So if we look at this chart, we actually see that healthcare in and of itself, so things like access to healthcare and the quality of healthcare that you're receiving, really only contributes about 20% to your overall health status. And if we want to dig a little bit deeper, that part that we usually think of when we think of healthcare, working in healthcare, and when actually health happens, really only takes up about 20% of that 20%. So again, any type of interaction in a healthcare space, so going to a doctor's office, going to a hospital, going to urgent care, those types of interactions really only make up 20% of that 20% of healthcare that determines our overall health. So if we think about this in terms of where we're spending money in our healthcare system, why are we still seeing such persistent health disparities within our communities? Why are people still so unhealthy and just living in these very unjust societies and situations? A lot of that has to do with the fact that we are diverting a lot of our money into an area that's not having a very large impact on our overall health. Now, what does have a huge impact on our overall health are things like your health behaviors. So your personal health behaviors. Do you smoke? Do you follow a healthy diet and exercise? Are you drinking alcohol, et cetera? Those individual health behaviors are going to determine about 30% of your overall health. Then we have things like your physical environment. So are you living in an area where you're dealing with neighborhood violence? Are you living in an area where you're experiencing environmental injustice, where maybe you have a lot of highways around your home, which is going to impact the air quality and water quality? Maybe you're living near a sewer. I personally grew up, if anyone has heard of Cancer Alley here in Louisiana, which is our River Parishes area, where there's a lot of refineries in that area. So that would be considered a physical environment. Where I grew up here, therefore I'm more prone to get cancer because I grew up around these cancer promoting areas. So that's going to be your physical environment. That determines about 10% of your overall health. But what determines most of your health is actually going to be your education status, your job status, your income level, community safety, your family and social support. This is in public health. This is what we call our social determinants of health. On this particular picture, we have socioeconomic factors. Now, public health really deals with everything from the health behaviors on up. And honestly, we deal with this entire chart because when it comes to, again, with healthcare, that access to care and quality of care, a lot of public health workers will actually work in those areas as well. So I always tell people that these particular factors are going to have a much larger impact on your health overall. And as we start to sort of think about what people in public health do, the reason why the impact of public health is so large is because we're focusing in those areas that have the largest impact on people's health. And it's not from an individual focus. So you won't see us, well, you can see us working individually with people, but you tend to see us working in communities, putting on different types of programs. You'll see us working in policy, where we're actually completely changing policies to promote the health of communities. But usually we're focused on sort of your larger impact, your big picture type work. So to kind of understand that better, I have another picture of what we call sort of your upstream versus downstream. So again, public health is going to be very much so prevention focused, and we consider that to be upstream, where medicine is very much so treatment focused, which we consider to be downstream. So in this particular picture, if we think of the stream as disease, and we'll say that we have our medical professionals working downstream, and they're just sort of seeing people in the river. They just keep coming. We don't know why they're coming, but we're going to pull them out. I have my little floaty. I'm going to just get them out of the river and figure out what I can do to save them. So we're going to pull them out of the river once they get downstream. at that point, they're already downstream. We may already be losing some people. They're already, say, drowning within this particular stream, but we're doing our best. We're throwing our floaty in, we're pulling them out. A public health work, on the other hand, would say, now what's actually going on here? Why is it that we're seeing all of these people in the stream? Let me go upstream and see what's going on. And we actually find this cliff that someone is up here just sort of pushing people off of this cliff, and we intervene there. So for instance, if we think in terms of maybe someone with diabetes, we have all of these communities that have disproportionate impact of diabetes within their communities for whatever reason or another. And of course, your physicians, your doctors are working very hard to pull people out. We're treating, we are giving the medications, and we're going to help you manage your diabetes with these medications. A public health professional would say, well, why is everyone in this community getting diabetes? Are there any policies that we can pass? Maybe there's some type of programming. Maybe people just aren't aware. Do they have access to healthy foods? Is there maybe some zoning laws that we can work on to make sure that they have grocery stores within their communities? Is there any type of programming? Maybe we can partner with local churches, we can partner with local organizations to be boots on the ground and actually get information out to people so that they can understand that, yes, you may be living within this community, but here are some things that you can do to live a healthy lifestyle. Here are some things that you can do to actually prevent disease, but also working on removing barriers to people doing that. So not just giving you the information to actually live the healthy life, but also working to create the environment in which you can actually live that healthy life. So do we need to improve sidewalks? Maybe if we need a park in that area. It's very, very broad in terms of what public health can do, but it's very much so, whereas medicine is focused on what is happening, public health is more so focused on how and why is this happening. And we intervene again in that upstream way that has a very large impact on health overall. So sort of going back to that question of what we said between 1990 or 1900s and 1999, life expectancy increased by 30 years. We have people that said, okay, obviously medical care is going to account for about 20 to 25 of those years. Are we sticking by that? Do we have anyone that wants to change that answer, or anyone who thinks that it may be different? So I'm going to ask now, how many of those years do you think are attributed to public health? So that means if you said 25 years were medical care, then now that means you're thinking about 5 of those years were attributed to public health, or maybe 10 if you said 20. So does anyone want to throw out a number on how many of those years we actually think are attributed to public health? And I'm going to wait for just a second. Again, we can use the chat or the Q&A. Okay, so we have one person that says about 15 of those years were actually attributed to public health. Anyone else want to throw in a guess? Okay, it looks like we have a consensus on 15. So surprisingly, of those 30 years of increased life expectancy, 25 of those years were actually attributed to public health and public health measures. So things like seatbelt laws, things like tobacco policies where we can no longer smoke within city buildings, we can no longer smoke within restaurants or really in public at all. Things like working on the ground within communities, working in faith-based communities to get information out, partnering with different organizations to bring healthy produce to communities. All of these different things actually help to increase life expectancy by 25 years, which means that medical care, so those innovations, visiting your doctor's office, actually only increased life expectancy by 5 years. But that again goes back to that picture of what is actually impacting health. And this is not to say that we don't need doctors. Of course, we do need doctors. But I like to sort of bring that into context, because a lot of times when we think of healthcare, we tend to only think that those are the ways that we're going to have the largest impact, which when you're actually getting those students who truly do want to help their community, they want to work within their community, they want to bring better services to their community, a lot of times the best way to do that is through public health. You actually don't get that sort of on the ground, really hands-on working in the medical field itself. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I like to tell people that public health really is social justice. The core of public health is going to be social justice and equity. So this is essentially ensuring that all people are able to achieve their highest level of health. And again, much of our work, because we're really centered around that sort of social justice and equity focus, much of our work tends to be in low income, underserved, minority populations. So a lot of things that people may not automatically think are public health issues, you will always find a public health person involved in it some kind of way. So for instance, as we all know, there is a astronomical disparity right now where Black mothers are far more likely to die in childbirth compared to mothers of other races. That is a public health issue. We have individuals in public health that are working in maternal and child health, working on policies, working on trainings, whatever it will take to actually start to reduce that disparity. Things like racism, which is my actual research area. Racism is absolutely a public health issue. Things like gun violence, again, some things that people may not necessarily think of, but gun violence is a public health issue. So you will always find someone that is working in public health sort of at the table when it comes to talking about these different types of issues. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I just sort of wanted to put this up here, and you can always find this online, but this is sort of public health clinicians are going to be guided by our 10 essential public health services, which are coupled in, or not coupled, but which are grouped under what we call the core functions of public health. So that's going to be assessment, which is essentially we are monitoring disease within communities and addressing hazards and causes. So if we think maybe in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, now a lot of times I will admit your public health people are the ones that we don't really see. They were the ones that you were not necessarily on the sidelines. We were definitely not the ones that people were standing in their windows cheering for, but we were absolutely the ones who were monitoring what was going on with COVID-19. We were identifying the disease within the communities, identifying how it was spreading, and getting that information out on how to actually prevent that. So when it came down to, okay, we need to mask to prevent, we need to wash our hands. Here's how many people are actually in the communities. Here is some of this epidemiological data on when it's time to reopen, when we may need to pull back a little bit. Those were your public health workers. So all of that falls under assessment. Then we have policy development, which is essentially what are we doing about the issue? So this is going to be educating and mobilizing our communities to actually address health issues and promote policy. So these were your people who were hopefully on the ground helping to get people vaccinated. These were people who were doing your COVID-19 contact tracing. All of these were your public health workers. And then lastly, we have assurance, which again is just ensuring equity for all. So making sure that the things that we're doing in the most equitable way possible. And everyone actually has access to the benefit of the work that we're doing. And also just moving our field forward and making sure that we have a trained, educated field. So I like to tell people that in short, what does public health do? We do everything. And it can be a very difficult thing if I'm not lying, because I do work at Dillard University. So I'm fully undergrad. So having to sort of explain to people, so what can I do in public health? And I can easily draw them in because they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds so amazing. So what do? I always get the question of, well, what is my job going to be? That's a very hard one to answer because public health, again, touches everything. Like I said in the beginning, everything has to do with public health. So if you're interested in education, you can definitely do that with public health. If you're interested in gun violence, there is definitely a home or a path for you in public health. Of course, anything directly health related, maternal and child health, environmental health, of course, all of those things you have a path, but it can be a little daunting sometimes to advise around this because it can be very easy. Of course, if you have someone That's like, well, I want to be a doctor. Okay, well, easy. You want to be a doctor, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to go to nursing school, that means you're going to be a nurse. There is no deviation from that. That is pretty simple. But when it comes to telling people, okay, major in public health, and the question comes up, well, what is my job going to be? I don't know what to tell you. It can literally be anything that you can possibly think of. So some of your typical careers are going to be like your community health workers. Again, you have people who work in maternal and child health. You find us a lot in, of course, our governmental public health spaces. So your local health departments, state health departments, but you will also find us a lot in sort of your local community-based organizations. Personally, I have worked in pretty much everything from worksite wellness to community settings, so directly in community health. I've been in hospital settings. My last job was actually leading our stroke prevention work for a hospital in South Los Angeles, which was a lot of fun. But there are so many different themes. So global health, mental health, a clinic director. So your individuals who are interested in, they're like, well, I want to have my own clinic. I want to, here in New Orleans, we have the Ochsner Healthcare system. I want to be the CEO. I want to be at the very top of the Ochsner Healthcare system. Those are not going to be your physicians or your nurses. Those are going to be what we call healthcare administrators, which tends to fall a lot of times under public health. So if someone is interested in something like that, you can have them major in either healthcare administration. Some schools do have healthcare administration, or you can have them major in public health and go into getting their master's in healthcare administration. We also work in a number of settings. So we can work in clinical settings, we can work in government settings, we can work in community. But I always tell people public health is a really great career path for sort of blazing your own trail. And it is changing, it is expanding every day. Right now, our credentialing board for health educators, we call it InCheck. I don't ask you to say what that actually is because I don't know. But they are actually advocating very heavily right now for our certified health education specialists or master certified health education specialists to actually be able to bill insurance for our services. That is going to be a massive game changer for public health. So what that means is, yes, I was already working in a healthcare setting doing a lot of their community work, but now you can also maybe build out my department and start to use some of our people doing inpatient. I was already doing inpatient actually. When I was at the hospital, I was making sure that when they got discharged after having a stroke, that you were connected with whatever resources you may need to ensure that you're not coming back to the hospital. Now we can actually bill for those types of services. Now I can actually maybe even create my own clinic or create my own consulting company where I do the health education for a number of different organizations, and we can now bill insurance for my services. That's going to be a huge game changer for public health, and hopefully a lot more people will be more interested if we get into that sort of insurance billing cycle. But overall, public health is just, it's a lot of fun. It's constantly changing. I'm always working on something different. So when I was working with stroke prevention, I got to do everything from health education to working on addressing food deserts and food insecurity. I got to work around homelessness, drug abuse, tobacco cessation, and again, I did get to do some inpatient care coordination. So it is extremely broad. And if we can go to the next slide. Even if your students are not interested in maybe going full head first into public health as their number one choice, it is still a highly valued field. You will see a lot of times that your physicians will have a public health background, your dentists will have a public health background. There are some lawyers that work specifically in health policy. So they will do a JD and PH. A lot of nurses will tend to have a public health background. If anyone's interested in physician assistant, I personally always tell people, if you're interested in anything in healthcare, you should have a public health background, only because public health helps you to understand people. When you're getting your medical training, your dental training, it is very much so clinical. And it sort of takes away from understanding how this individual came into your office to start. So being in the field and actually working with people who were on admissions boards for medical schools, on admissions boards for dental school, the one thing that I constantly heard was that they're actually looking for people with these sort of diverse backgrounds, maybe in public health or just in something different than just your strictly biology or strictly science, because those people end up being more well-rounded health professionals. They have such a better understanding of the individual and sort of the whole person, and they're able to actually better address their needs. Now, I would be remiss if, as chair of my program, I did not try and plug a little bit for my program. So, as we did mention, I am chair of the School of Population Health Sciences at Dillard University in Louisiana. So our mission is really just to improve the health science and public health workforce. We're trying to increase the number of knowledgeable, culturally competent minority healthcare professionals with the in an effort to actually improve the health of our minority communities and reduce health disparities globally. So we're really trying to push out as many people in the healthcare field who are minority students who can actually go back into our communities and be of service to their community. So within our department, we do have two different majors. So we have our public health major, of course, with the concentration in health promotion and disease prevention, as well as a concentration in healthcare administration and systems management. So those are going to be, again, your healthcare administrators, the people who are running the hospitals. And then health promotion, disease prevention, honestly, that's sort of that, in short, we do everything, that's that one. And then we do have a health science major as well. So this is ideal for anyone who is maybe interested in medicine. Again, being someone who has served on some of these boards and is very close with a lot of people who serve on these admission boards for medical schools, for physician assistant programs, they are looking for people that have a different major than biology. Our particular health science program, it integrates a few of our public health classes while still ensuring that they will get everything, all of the prerequisites that they need to get into, say, a medical school program or a DPT or a master's in occupational therapy program. So they're basically getting the best of both worlds. They're going to come into these programs. They're going to stand out because they have a different major, and they're going to have sort of that broad background that will actually be of great assistance to them in these particular programs. And then lastly, we have a number of available opportunities to our students. So we do have a 3-2 program with LSU in the area where essentially our students will come to us. They will do their first 3 years at Dillard. And if they have a high enough GPA, they have done some internships, gotten some experience in the field, we will then say you would be a great candidate for our 3-2 program. And they will actually be able to start the Master of Public Health program at LSU a year early. So essentially, that first year in their master's program will count as their senior year at Dillard. And then they will finish out the master's program. So in about 5 years, they will have both their bachelor's and their master's. We also have a new program right now with Tulane University where we have a public health early access program. So it is essentially guaranteed admissions into Tulane's School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. So any of the programs that they have within that school, and they have also recently taken away the requirement that you have to have a master's to get into their doctoral program. So it really opens up all of the programs at Tulane to our students. So if they graduate from the Dillard Public Health, or honestly, any major in Dillard, but if they graduate from any major at Dillard with, I believe it's a 3.3 GPA or higher, they are pretty much guaranteed admissions into any of the programs at Tulane University, which is one of the top programs in public health. And it also comes with a scholarship. I believe it's about a 25% tuition discount for the program as well. So that's sort of a direct pathway. We also work with universities like Boston University, for public health, which also comes with a tuition discount. And that one's more of a preferred application. It's not guaranteed admissions, but it's a preferred application. We have things for physician assistantship. We have some things coming down the pipeline for our physical therapy students, occupational therapy students. So we have a lot of really great opportunities. And our program really does sort of institutionalize service learning. So those students who need, who are going to need, say, observation hours to get into some of these programs, we have actually built our program to automatically include all of that, so that by the time they finish, not only will they be well-rounded, but they're going to have everything that they need to go directly into these higher level programs. So I really hope that that was helpful for everyone, that this sort of helps you to understand public health. As if it's not obvious, I am extremely passionate about public health. So if we have any questions, I'm happy to take those. Feel free to send me an email or give me a call. You can also follow me on Twitter and ask me questions there. But I am more than willing to be a resource to anyone who would love to learn more about public health and how you can advise your students for sort of this, I won't say new career, it's sort of a career that no one talks about much. People tend to find us a lot later into their sort of academic journey. And I'm really pushing for people to find us a lot sooner. I think a lot of people will truly love public health. I know I am someone who came into school thinking that what I wanted to do was be a physician. And it was more so that what I wanted to do, I thought that to do that, I had to be a physician. So my why as to how I ended up in public health. I actually grew up in a very rural community. I watched a lot of people die from very preventable diseases. One very pivotal moment for me was a friend of mine, father actually passed away from a heart attack. And he actually would have survived if we lived anywhere near a hospital. But because it took so long for the ambulance to get to him and actually get him to medical services, he ended up passing. So from a very young age, my passion was always access to care and how can we sort of empower these rural communities to sort of help themselves in certain ways. Like how can we ensure that they have the resources that they need, that they have the knowledge that they need to live healthy lifestyles, so that they're not super burdened by living in these rural communities so far away from services. And I was very convinced that I had to be a medical doctor to do that. Actually, everything that I just said is very much so heavily rooted in public health work. And had I become a physician, I actually would not have been able to work in that area, especially not as much as I would like to, not as deeply as I would like to, without sort of getting an extra degree in public health and sort of diving heavily into public health anyway. So that's sort of how I came to it. I ended up coming to it a little bit late because I didn't know about it. No one ever told me. So I try now, I'm very passionate about trying to expose people as early as possible for that reason. Because there's a lot of people who are very passionate about helping community. They know what they want to do and they just don't know the best way to do it. So I hope that that was helpful. And thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. I really appreciate it and definitely enjoy the session as well. So moving on to our final session of the day is Counselor Advocacy, an overview of government relations in Louisiana and SACAC'S public school engagement, presented by Justin Fenske and Elizabeth Sandridge. Justin Fenske joined Episcopal as the Director of College Counseling in 2014 and has been in the field since 2008. Justin graduated from the University of Michigan and earned a master's in education from Boston University. During his time at Episcopal, his team has implemented a comprehensive high school program priding itself on individual attention to students in all grade levels. Justin is a certified Highlands Ability Battery consultant and has also spent time developing and implementing online career and college tools for high school students in the state of Michigan and as an administrator at Boston University. Elizabeth Staggers is currently the director of college counseling for her alma mater, St. Thomas More Catholic High School in Lafayette, Louisiana. Before starting her career in high school counseling, she worked in admissions for the University of Louisiana at Lafayette and Louisiana State University. After working in admissions, she found a passion for helping students explore their future and discover their passions. So she began her career as a school counselor. And I'm gonna turn it over to you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. So as you've been listening today, I'm hoping that by this point you're saying, what can I do? How can I be more involved? And that's where Elizabeth and I are coming in here at the end, is to help you, give you some concrete tools of what you can do. I also serve as the co-chair of government relations for Louisiana. And so what I'm going to talk about is specifically advocacy today. And that can seem daunting. And I think about advocacy for myself. This is new to me. I took this role on this year. And so I'm still learning a lot about what advocacy means and how I can be involved in the state. And so if you could go to the next slide. I think the most important thing to remember is that when it comes to advocacy, you are the expert. You know what your institution needs. You know what you care about. You have concerns. And that's really what we want to empower you to do, is take the areas that you care about and advocate for them. And so NACAC has a number of areas that they focus on. And so I'm going to kind of walk through where NACAC is, and that means also therefore where SACAC and government relations is, really putting their effort. For the next slide, please. And so that is student and equity-centered admission practices, professional responsibility and ethics for college admission counseling professionals, and then the expansion of capacity and impact of school counselors and advisors. And so I'm going to dig a little bit more deeply into those. If you could go to the next slide. So the first one is emphasizing the needs of systematically underserved students. So we heard about that earlier this morning. And when we think about the Supreme Court decision coming in, this is going to even more ramp up the need for advocating for the needs of those systematically underserved students. Also looking to expand their playing field, grow the areas that NACAC is having advocacy on policy, and then kind of trying to create NACAC as a clearinghouse for equity-centered practice, so that when people are looking how to bring more equity into admissions and into their fields, that NACAC's seen as a clearinghouse, a place that they can do that. Next slide, please. Ethics are, of course, important to all of us. If you are familiar with the history of ethics in NACAC, that has been a major area of change, as we used to have guiding rules and important rules that we were required to follow as members of the organization, but those are gone. That doesn't mean we're not ethical. We still have guidelines. We still have things that we need to understand and follow. And NACAC's advocacy role here is to help make sure that every college and school counselor knows what those ethics are and are able to be educated on what ethical practice looks like in college admissions counseling. But beyond that, it's also about helping the wider world know, the public, the policymakers, media, know what our ethical guidelines are, our ethical practices are, so that they can trust in colleges, trust in schools, and know that we are working to help the students. And of course, then that comes down to concrete things like advocating for policies that help enshrine those ethical practices within colleges. Before I move specifically on to NACAC's goal of support for school counselors, I think this is an area to dive a little bit more deeply into, because it's an area that for many of the people on this webinar today, it's very close to. So NACAC wants to support school counselors and has done some research showing that students who meet one-on-one with a counselor are almost 7 times more likely to complete FAFSA, over 3 times more likely to attend college, and twice as likely to enroll in a bachelor's degree program. I mean, I think everybody knows that our school counselors matter, but here's some evidence. Here's the proof, right? The work we do when it comes to college is important. And so making sure that we have the resources and that the college counselors are set up for success so that they can do this important work is a major area. And Louisiana is not doing so great on this. Next slide, please. Louisiana is 40th in the nation for student to counselor ratios. And our suggested ratio is 250 to 1. We are at 445 to 1. So there's definitely work to be done in Louisiana to support our school counselors and to reach that goal. Next slide, please. So some of the ways, or as we look at this, it's not equal across the state either. If you look at this map, you'll see that for some areas, they meet that goal of having 250 or fewer students to college counselor. And then there's other areas that are more than double that ratio. So this is always an area for advocacy for NACAC and SACAC, is reducing those student to counselor ratios, making sure that our representatives understand the value. They understand those statistics I showed earlier about how college counselors matter. But more than that, making sure that college counselors have the bandwidth to do it. That their timing isn't taken up solely with scheduling and testing and discipline, and instead they are able to work on this college piece and have our conversations with their students about college so that they can have the impact that we want them to have within our state. And of course, making sure that those school counselors are receiving the training and being equipped to meet those needs of students. Some broader areas that NACAC supports: college affordability, is always there, making sure that kids can go, helping protect against fraud and abuse. The DACA Dream Act is supported by NACAC. The ability for students to move globally for college, and then of course being able to transfer within colleges, those pathways, all supported by NACAC. Right now, the biggest issues on the next slide are the Supreme Court decision and equity, those being really hot button and important areas of advocacy that NACAC can have. If you could go to the next slide, please. Sorry, that it jumped twice. I mean, you could just leave it there. Education funding is an important area, and that's actually my next slide. Student protection, and then of course, financial aid notification, helping students understand what those financial aid packages mean, helping them be standardized and understand, or so that it's clear to everyone. All right, if I could have the next slide, please. Talking about financing, I pulled this from the Board of Regents. Louisiana, again, not where we necessarily want them to be. That blue line is the state funding for college, how schools were making up their funding. So back in 2009, almost 70% of a university's funding in Louisiana was coming from the state. On the flip side, at that time, a little over 30% was coming from self-generated revenue, think tuition, fees, et cetera. And over the past 15 years, that has changed dramatically. Now schools are getting most of their money from self-generated revenue. And that means that that affordability piece is going more to individuals as opposed to coming and being supported by the state. There's actually a lot of news articles going into 2023. There's a lot of pride that we are funding higher education at its highest rate in years. And that's true, but it's nothing compared to what it was before. And so helping advocate for increased funding for financial or for our higher education is an area that we can work on in Louisiana. Next slide, please. So we work, NACAC works in coalitions. They do not do this all alone. If you'll move to the next slide, they amplify their message through collaboration with many different organizations trying to grow their reach and work with these other great organizations to support NACAC's mission. All right, so with all that, I said I'd give you some things that you could do. So that's the broad picture of what NACAC is working on, but what can you do? One area, move to the next slide, are action alerts. So NACAC creates these action alerts for legislation that needs support from experts and the public, and you're both those things. So you can get on and learn exactly what needs to be done, whether it's emailing your legislator, or if there's a social media campaign. NACAC will provide you with the tools so that you can be involved on those issues. On the next page, you'll see that you can follow @NACAC-WOG on Twitter. You can also sign up for the monthly legislative update using this website, and you'll have access to this afterwards if you can't write that down quickly enough. There is the NACAC provides the bulletin and journal, and then the NACAC website Advocacy is huge. So that's just NACAC.net or NACACnet.org/advocacy. Lots of information, all that's available to both NACAC and members and non-members. You can get in there and see all the work that NACAC is doing and suggestions of how you can be involved. If you have specific questions, you can reach out to David Hawkins, who actually runs the advocacy piece for NACAC. He is fantastic, helped provide me with this slideshow to get you thinking about advocacy. And so he's a great resource if you have questions. And of course, I will also shamelessly plug Louisiana Legislative Day, which my co-chair Brian Cooper and I have been working to put together for May 23rd. And if you're thinking, again, how do I get involved? This is a great way, a great first step. So what we have planned for that day is you're going to hear from NACAC about advocacy and how to be an effective or effectively advocate. Then we're going to go straight into a session with Louisiana legislators, a person from the Board of Regents and Louisiana Office for Student Financial Aid. And we are going to have an opportunity to engage with them, learn about the issues being faced this year in our legislative session, and also broader issues that we can work to advocate for. And so with that, I'd also just encourage you, this is my, as I said, this is my first year doing this. I'm learning a lot about advocacy. Come join me on this journey. My email and Brian's email is right there. If this is something that you say that advocacy and working for the state of Louisiana and improving education for all is important to me, contact us. We'd love to get you involved in any way that we can. And with that, I'll pass it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Justin. I am going to talk a little bit about the public school initiative that is brought through SACAC. If you could go to the next slide, please. So most of you probably are aware of SACAC since you are here at this drive-in, but one thing just to kind of touch on a little bit of the history and the mission of the organization is to promote professional growth, access, advocacy, and outreach for all students and helping them realize their post-secondary education. Our current membership for SACAC is a little over 2,100 counselors, college professionals, CBOs, independent counselors. So it has a wide range of people inside of SACAC. One thing I did note, though, when I was looking at our membership is only 5% of SACAC is from Louisiana. So there's not a huge representation from our state. So to help kind of spread awareness, I just wanted to make y'all all aware of some of the resources inside of SACAC and how to help encourage those other counselors and admission professionals that you come across into joining our organization. to really help kind of bring more advocacy for our students into state initiatives. One is the Public School Counselor Initiative that was started in 2017, but it's a really great resource for our public school counselors to help them gain access to all that is inside of SACAC. So if you go to the next slide for me, please. Just to kind of break down our membership in Louisiana, so you can kind of see who is missing at our table. There's always a large amount of private school counselors, and we love to see those different schools represented, but also kind of trying to bring in some more of the university professionals, the CBOs in our area, as well as the public school counselors. Next slide, please. So this is the QR code for our free access membership FAM. So any public school counselor or CBO counselor can gain free membership to SACAC. And this is huge because I know a lot of time cost is a barrier, especially when you have to pay for your own membership to these organizations. As a former public school counselor, not having to worry about one more membership was huge for me. So being able to utilize this was a great resource, but I am finding as I'm talking to other counselors across the state, they're just not aware that SACAC exists and that they might be eligible for free membership. So when you're going out onto campus tours, talking with other counselors, maybe in your region at department meetings, anytime that you're just in front of others in this profession, please promote SACAC and let them know that there is a free membership option for those public school counselors and those CBOs. Next slide, please. You can keep going. So just to highlight some of the benefits of our membership, personally, I've utilized most of these. It was really helpful. I am in a little island as a counselor, the only counselor doing college stuff on our campus. So having access to these different resources inside of SACAC were invaluable for me, especially the annual conference where I got to meet other counselors doing similar work and see how they set up their offices, what program they were doing. I was a summer seminar participant last year, so I actually got to go to UNC Charlotte and stay on campus for several days and just go over a boot camp of college counseling. We went through rec letters, ethics, and how to have an ethical office. And it was just a great way to network with other kind of new college counselors. We still have a very active group, me, and I chat with a lot of them to say okay, what are you doing? What have you seen? As a way to really stay engaged. Dry run is the same thing, but for the admission side. So if you know any new admission reps that are coming to your schools and maybe they're feeling a little lost or overwhelmed, Dry Run is a perfect workshop for them. So you could even let them know that there are resources there for them. Sweet Tea Tour is a really fun experience. I actually get to go this summer. I'm very excited. Where you rotate between different universities in a state and you get to see what they offer for their students and have a better way of kind of suggesting schools to your students when you come back to campus. You're at the drive-in workshop. It's always exciting. Justin just plugged our legislative day. It's really important that if you can attend, we go and we have a united voice and really kind of advocate on behalf of those who can't be there for themselves. And they also, for any one who just really loves reading and talking about inclusion, access, and success, there are virtual book clubs that happen in the fall. Next slide, please. And the list keeps going. So there, for your students, there are many college camps. So whenever I was a public school counselor, there was just no way I could provide resources individually for my students to talk about college lists, to talk about scholarships, talk about essays. I was doing testing. I was in expulsion hearings. I was kind of all over the place. And so I would push them to the SACAC mini camps. It was a great way for them to get the support they needed to go throughout the admissions process when I couldn't be there as their counselor because of administrative duties. So it's a great resource for our students. They even have scholarships for students as well. But then there are also like almost like scholarships for counselors or grants that you can apply for to help you fund different programs inside of your school. So if you hear of a public school counselor, or if you and a public school counselor want to partner together to create programming, there are funds through SACAC. So if you don't get funds from your parish or your school board, SACAC's a really great resource you can utilize to be able to provide those services for your students. Really, I think you kind of have heard throughout the day-to-day, the overarching theme is advocacy, support, inclusion, and making sure the students get access to what they need to be the most successful. You can go next slide, please. So just a call to action, ways that you can get involved, help us promote SACAC. When you go, like I said, if you're ever going on a counselor visit to a university, if you're talking to another counselor about something you're seeing kind of in your community, don't be afraid to plug SACAC. The website is super easy to navigate and full of resources for our counselors. Engage in the community, keep trying to encourage others to come to our drive-ins, to come to these different resources. But if you would like to volunteer, there's a link in there to the volunteer form through SACAC, so you can actually start getting involved. If we go to the next slide, we have a list of all of the different committees that you could volunteer with. So if you have any questions about those, I'd be happy to help point you to the person that'd be able to give you more insight to these different areas. But it's a really great way to start building connection. Honestly, the way I came to be presenting about this was because I was in the mentor-mentoree program and got swooped up into just getting plugged into these different committees. So it's really an invaluable way of networking and getting to know others kind of in our area. Next slide, please. I'm one of those that anytime I do a presentation, I love to put a ton of resources at the end because I know that's how I really got started in kind of utilizing my own toolbox. So when you get the slides, you'll be able to go back into all of these, but these are things that I personally use on a pretty regular basis. If you ever have additional resources that you want to share with others, please let me know and I'll add them onto the slide just to keep kind of spreading awareness about the tools and the resources that are out there for students. Even sometimes as counselors, we just have so much that finding these resources can get really difficult. So I try and share these as much as possible. So if there's anyone who needs resources or doesn't know where to start, feel free to always give them my contact information. I'm happy to kind of help create a little bundle of information for them or share what I use kind of in my day-to-day practice to hopefully make their lives a little bit easier. Next slide, please. I also want to plug the SACAC conference. Early registration, I think, ends today. I may be wrong. I can triple check on that, but there is still time to register for the conference. It's going to be in Jacksonville. You already got a sneak peek about the awesome presentations that go on there, but it's also just really essential for networking with other counselors, or even they have a college fair, so you can actually see the different universities as well. Whenever I was able to attend, it was a great way for me to actually get schools onto our campus, and then from there kind of educate them about the other schools in the area. So even if you wanted to do that as well, it's a really easy way. To kind of starting to engage with those professionals from out of state that we maybe don't see as often. Thank y'all so much for kind of lending your ear. Again, if y'all ever need something, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Justin. Thank you to all of our presenters today. We are at the end of our drive-in workshop, but we do have a little bit of time for question and answer. And so I want to open up the space for our attendees to ask our presenters any questions that they have from their presentation earlier. And while we're waiting on those questions to come through, I have a question from for each of our presenters. I know normally when I leave a conference or leave any type of professional development situation. I'm typically like more excited and enthusiastic, but then also overwhelmed by all the information that I receive. And so I wonder if each of you, just maybe one representative from each presentation, could highlight one to-do task, like what's one thing we should add to our to-do list for this week, as well as one resource we should add to our toolkit to help us continue to process the information that was shared. So we'll start with our first session, which was navigating the race-conscious admissions decision with the Supreme Court. Is Shannon still on? Let me see.
Hey there. I'm here. Okay, so tell me the question again.
Yes, so one to-do item that we should add, and then one resource that we should add to our toolkit.
Okay, so I think a to-do item is we're going to send out the slide deck, and I think just educating yourself. This is a great resource. Like we took a lot of research and brought it down to just a few slides, but that'll help catch you up on the history of affirmative action and race-conscious admissions. So that's a great kind of resource to tap into. And then I think just make sure, for me, my takeaway is to really make sure I'm listening to my students and I'm seeing them and encouraging them to be, their authentic selves and to embrace their identity in all aspects, and to learn language to articulate, why, talking about themselves in context is so important.
Thank you. Let's see, is Dr. Reed still on?
Yes, I'm still here. I guess my main takeaway would be listening to students and actually, I guess, getting down to their why. I think a lot of times when students say, I just want to help people, and I want to be in the healthcare field, we are so quick to push doctor and nurse without truly understanding why they want to do that. And if it's really a focus in prevention and they really want to be on the ground in the community, I do think it's our duty to kind of educate ourselves around the vast different professions that there are within healthcare so that we can help these students actually find a career that they're truly interested in. A resource, that's a hard one. I'm gonna throw out the American Public Health Association's website. There's a lot of great information there on public health. I will admit the conference is very overwhelming, but they can also help to connect you with maybe some of your local state public health associations as well, so that you can kind of get more information on public health and have somewhere to go, just to kind of touch bases with some people in the field.
Thank you. Justin?
So for the to-do list, I would say go sign up for Legislative Day. Whether you can be there in person or online, that'll give you a great sense of what is going on in our state and how you can be involved. And if you can't do that, then at least make a note for yourself to go back and find the recording afterwards so that you can watch it. So no matter which way you do it, you're going to be able to get to that Legislative Day. And then for resource, I really will just go back to the NACAC advocacy page. That has so much there for you to dig in. So that's where I'd point everybody to go.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, I know you shared a lot of resources. I really appreciate that page that you included in the presentation, but is there any more resources or a to-do list item that you want us to focus on as far as involvement within SACAC?
Yes, I would say your one thing on the to-do list is to tell someone about SACAC. Just one other person in the field, just let them know that SACAC exists, and start kind of raising awareness. So hopefully we can have a higher percentage of Louisianians inside of SACAC. The resource I am currently using the most is the college essay guy community group. So he created one for parents and then one for counselors, with like so much information. I'm still like digging through it, but there's discussions about equity and inclusion, discussions about GPT and how that's going to impact essays in the future of college admissions, counselor introductions, a survey about self-care and burnout with the counselors and how to find your weaknesses, all kinds of webinars. And I was actually able to put in an appeal to get this access either free or at a discounted price as well. So if you're a school counselor, public or private, they consider that whenever you sign up to pay. So what he advertised is not what I paid for it, which is always the most beneficial for me too.
Awesome, thank you. And as Elizabeth shared earlier, just want to reshare a couple of the events that are coming up in SACAC. Of course, these are open to members, but we want to encourage membership for those of you who are not members, so that you can also participate in these upcoming events and webinars that are happening. And we want to also, Kayla and I want to encourage you to think about involvement with the SACAC drive-in workshops, whether it's helping us find more presenters presenting in the future or actually being one of the coordinators. So if you have an interest in that, please reach out to Kayla and I. We're happy to help you get connected in that way. And I'm going to turn it over to Kayla to close us out.
Awesome. So thank you so much again. Thank you to everyone that joined. If you want to learn more about SACAC or you have any questions about today's presentation, feel free to contact us using the information that you see on your screen. And thank you again for joining us. I hope y'all have a great day and see you later.
Thanks, everyone.